Chapter 10. Claudia and Haley didn't look like the people you'd want to hang out with, or even try and speak to. If anything, they looked like the type of couple that would try and drug you to join their threesome that would end with a painful injury and emotional trauma. I was used to emotional trauma, but I preferred not to have social plans that ended with cuts and stabs. It became increasingly clear that the whole lot of us were going to end up like Mrs. Elroy. So we could gracefully accept death, which we never did anything gracefully, or try to escape. Any sudden movement or gun involvement might actually bring around a quick death. I knew that even if we managed to get out, Haley and Claudia were like two monsters from Stranger Things who would have no problem chasing and tackling us down. And while we might work in an active field, the Senior Activity Center had more activity than anyone in our group. But it wasn't just that Claudia and Haley were two video game characters. They had submarine guns and a pocket full of torturous tools, so trying to fight them would practically be signing our death sentence. I wondered further about Claudia and Haley's allegiance to Redwood. They seemed both to be following his lead, but also acting like his mentor. They had killed Mrs. Elroy, but had that been purely Redwood's bidding? Or were the two assassin torturers tired of Mariah Elroy? I wondered what the exact dynamic was, and if there was a way to exploit that. Did Redwood really want us dead? His notes seemed to be driving at that. But maybe he wanted to be the one to do the killing. Maybe Redwood had ordered Claudia and Haley to run us through their torture techniques, but hold off on an execution. Haley and Claudia were moving Mrs. Elroy's body so that they had more room to deal with us. I turned to Mariah, who looked a bit defeated with a glazed-over face. I was able to nudge her with my foot, and Mariah turned to face me. "We need a diversion," I muttered. "What's our best bet?" Santiago leaned in, curious at our musings. "Our best bet is these loudmouths." Mariah handed Mrs. Findie off to Alison. "Why does she have to hold me?" Mrs. Findie barked. "You're right. We should use the loudmouths to our advantage. It's the only shot of escape." I nodded softly to Mariah, keeping an eye out on Haley and Claudia, who are currently turning back away from us. "Let's keep Alison and Mrs. Findie out of the loop. When we have a moment, you, Santiago, and I can catch them off guard." There wasn't time to say anything else. For a moment I believed Claudia and Haley would follow up with Mariah and I's gossiping, but instead, Mrs. Findie sent off a clap of attacks. "I don't know who's worse," Mrs. Findie snapped. "The big hooker that's holding me, or the two whores who are going to kill me." "Killing you isn't possibly the worst thing I can do," Claudia threatened, glaring at Mrs. Findie as if she was a person and not a metallic talking box. "Besides, whore is actually a compliment. I'm a thin, gorgeous woman. I naturally attract men." "Thin and gorgeous?" Mrs. Findie sounded taken aback. "I'm confused. Are you describing yourself?" "You're a brick," Haley snarled, "and we're very thin. My body fat percentage is 5%, and that's below average." "I'm fat because I have to be fat," Mrs. Findie roared. "What's your excuse?" "That's what they all say," Claudia screamed. Claudia and Haley were now closing in on Mrs. Findie and Alison. Mariah and I were able to shimmy a bit, so we were behind them. While the screaming match continued, Mariah and I reached out and grabbed the two girls by the legs. Claudia and Haley went down like two Gumbies, slamming their heads against the floor. Santiago, taking advantage of the moment, opened a gallon tube of glitter glue and poured it over the girls. Claudia and Haley moaned in pain and stickiness. "Let's go!" Mariah immediately yelled into the room. Alison got into her feet quicker than a 4-year-old child on a sugar high. The four of us, 5 if you counted Mrs. Findie, bolted out of the room. We weren't exactly sure where we were, but then the staircase that climbed up seemed to confirm that we were on the second level. "Down the stairs!" I yelled at Mariah, who was in the lead. Claudia and Haley were swearing and yelling in the background. "Shit, we need Ryan Mazzola. Where can he be?" "Not sure. I'll go with you," Santiago immediately confirmed. "Mariah, Alison, Miss Findie." I rang the team out like a coach ready to pump up the team before a big match. "Get help. We'll get out of here once we have Mazzola." "I have my cell phone," Mariah said to herself in a duh voice before pressing 911 on the emergency dial. On the first level, Mariah, Alison, and Mrs. Findie jumped through the front door as if they had 5 seconds to leave the building before a bomb went off. Santiago and I hid behind one of the shelves of fancy crepe paper and buckets of craft junk. Moments after stabilizing our hidden selves, Claudia and Haley emerged like two children who had gotten too excited with the art supplies. "They left!" Claudia surmised, tossing her giant gun all over the room. I could tell that the glitter glue had knocked some of their confidence out. "Damn it, we have to find them." Haley charged forward with Claudia behind them. I wondered if people would call the police if they saw two girls covered in glue and waving guns, but then I figured that was probably a normal occurrence in Ohio, and the general witness would probably chuckle and keep moving. With the girls on the street, I turned to Santiago. "Okay," I whispered to Santiago, "stay here and wait for me to come back with Mazzola. Let's just hope I don't run into Redwood. I'm sure it'll be quick. Call Anthony and make sure Claudia and Haley don't come back in." Santiago nodded. By my limited power of perception, I assumed Mazzola was probably in the main store area, since I could hear him earlier through the vent. I opened the door, which led to the main floor. Most of the shelving was bare and untreated. Sitting, roped up in a chair, was Ryan Mazzola. He was semi-unconscious, covered in bloody cuts, and his breath appeared shallow and inconsistent. Redwood was nowhere to be seen. "Ryan!" I forcefully whispered to wake him up, but Ryan either couldn't hear me or couldn't respond. I pulled him to the back part of the store with ease. I'm a little thicker. I'd rather be tortured by Haley and Claudia than give away my weight. And I had a little strength, thanks to my $10 a month gym membership I used once a week. But Ryan Mazzola was a tall, thin man who weighed about 130. Dragging him was, well, not a highlight of my day. After dragging Ryan Mazzola like he was a carton of potatoes for a few seconds, Santiago appeared to help grab Ryan on his left side. "It sounded like you needed help," remarked Santiago, most likely hearing me huff and puff like a fat wolf in the Three Little Pigs' tale. "Let's get out of here," I told Santiago. "This whole event has been a nightmare." In retrospect, I might have jinxed us. Claudia and Haley burst through the front door with submarine guns at the ready. Well, Claudia sassed, as if she was paid for each individual "well" she could throw into her statement. "I didn't realize you were a broken record," I remarked. "Makes sense why nobody wants you." "So you didn't escape to freedom because you wanted to play savior?" Haley stared down at the slumped-over form of Ryan Mazzola. "Well, now you're going to become a martyr." "I didn't save him because I wanted to play hero," I corrected. "I was part of the reason he got kidnapped, and I'm not letting him die to a pair of glittery, chopstick-wearing, low-crop, floral-top, torture-assassin psycho bitches." Both Claudia and Haley gasped as if I had spat on their mother's face and called her an expletive, better saved for medieval Europe. "That's it." Haley's voice thinned out. "You've really done it now." "We know that you can't kill us," Santiago threw out into the room. "Redwood told you not to, and he'll kill you if you do." Claudia and Haley gulped. It had been a guess, but a correct one. The girls were good at manipulating fear, but their poker face would get them exiled out of Vegas. "So step aside," Santiago finished, pulling out his own gun. "We'll call it a day." "No!" Claudia tightened her white-knuckle grip on her submarine gun. "I may not be able to kill you, but I can maim you." Now it was my turn to gulp. Santiago seemed immune to threats. We paused, eyeing each other like a stupid spy movie. While we all seemed to measure the situation, a police siren started to blossom. I felt an anvil of worry come off of me. "Shit!" Claudia muttered, and she and Haley ran, leaving glitter on the back office floor. I wasn't sure if Redwood had already left the house, but he'd be stupid to stay in the house when emergency services were on their way. I looked through the window as Claudia and Haley piled into a sleek convertible. They peeled out of the lot as if they were on the Amazing Race. I exited the house with Santiago, both of us carrying knocked-out Ryan Mazzola. Redwood did not exit the house behind us, and no cars evacuated the parking lot. A police car soon rolled up to where we stood in the parking lot. Anthony and David jumped out of the car in full garb. "Thank God you were quick," I muttered, turning my head in the direction of Ryan Mazzola. "We need help." "We're lucky we were around," Anthony nodded sternly. "We have a ton of officers with Mariah, Alison, and Mrs. Findie already. They ran over to the shopping center. That's how they got away. And the good news is we have an ambulance coming." I filled in Anthony and David with a quick version of what had happened when we had visited Ryan Mazzola, to our kidnapping and arrival of crafty creatures, to finding out Mrs. Elroy was alive and watching her die. When the ambulance arrived, I was allowed to take it with Ryan Mazzola and left Santiago behind. Thankfully, Ryan's injuries were quickly patched up. He was given a bed for an overnight stay and some hydration. Once he was out of the woods and feeling better, Ryan and I shared our experiences back at Crafty Creatures. "I can't believe you saved me from that store." Mazzola's voice was fluttery, as if he couldn't believe anyone in his life would do that. I couldn't help but notice the small wounds and chunks pulled out of his body by Redwood. "The nursing staff told me that in my condition, I would have bled out in a couple hours had you not called the cops and scared Redwood away." "We called the cops for the whole thing. Don't worry about it." I felt a bit awkward, so I tried to make it seem like we had gotten Ryan a donut and not helped save his life. "But still, thanks." Mazzola nodded, scratching his arm. I couldn't tell if he was scratching the scabs or if it was a reaction to a withdrawal of drugs. Listen, I told Ryan blankly, Claudia and Haley seem to be familiar with you. What do you know about them? I just know that they know Mr. McGee, Mazzola shrugged. Seen them a few times, don't even know their names. I'd say they started working for him a couple months ago. From what Anthony had told me, Claudia and Haley were Cleveland's top assassins who remained more elusive than a palm of sand held under ocean water. Apparently, Claudia and Haley were who you would call if you were rich and smart and needed someone threatened, tortured, maimed, framed, manhandled, and killed. So why did Redwood need them? He couldn't do his own torturing and killing? I don't know, Mazzola sighed. I guess he wanted backup, and look, he put Larry in jail, killed Quinns, almost killed me. I excused myself when the nurse came in to check on Mazzola, so I checked in with Mariah, calling her right outside Mazzola's hospital room. Got anything? Mariah asked. Just that Haley and Claudia seem to have been working with Redwood for a while. You? Actually, I have a potential address for Claudia and Haley. You do? From the system? I was shocked. If we knew where they lived, then how come the cops hadn't arrested these two? I called a friend of a friend. I was skeptical. Okay. It's not that crazy. We've made some contacts since starting to work at Zalaki. I guess that was true. More so contacts to call and ask about assassins, not the kind of contacts to call for a wine lunch. What did you get? I pressed on. So it makes sense that the two girls have some cash. They own a house on Murray Hill. You know that red one? The one by Little Italy with the cute garden out front? I was familiar. I drove through that area often wishing I had the kind of career which could afford a house that was owned by two murdering psychopaths. Yes. No way! The house is listed under a different name, but I can't find anything out about that person who technically owns the house. It's probably a front, but I trust the rumor mill. Keep digging on that address. Deal. I got off the phone with Mariah and returned to Ryan's bedroom. Can I ask, if you knew Redwood was crazy and bad, why steal and cut him out of the money? It wasn't necessarily a great thing. Mazzola took a deep breath. Quinns and I, well, we were closer than Quinns and Larry, or Larry and myself. Quinns wanted to cut Redwood out because Redwood kept upping his price of the operation for no good reason. We saw the writing on the wall. Quinns knew Redwood was going to take over the operation, squeeze us out or jail us, handle our little company. We thought we could hurry up, make a ton of money, and get out of town for a while. Screw Redwood over before he could screw us. Why not tell Larry these details about Redwood's continual price gouging? Quinns was worried that Larry might side with Redwood, frame the two drug kids, and get out of Dodge. So nobody really trusted each other. That's the name of the game. And Redwood found out. Yeah, he probably had a listening device on us or something. I still don't know how he found out. Guess it doesn't matter. Why did Redwood kill Elroy's wife, the wife's lover, and the wife's sister? Isn't that a bit crazy? I thought so too, Mazzola muttered. I wondered if Mrs. Elroy asked for it. Wanted to punish Larry somehow. Redwood figured it was a few birds with one rock. I bet Redwood enjoyed the torment and killings anyway. It would have been easier to straight out kill Elroy. I paused to think through everything I had learned. It didn't make the most sense, but isn't that what made the situation crazy, and thus Redwood crazy? Maybe it didn't make perfect sense because Redwood was an insane sadomasochist killer who had his own unsound reasoning for the crimes. While I was casually dipping my mind in thought, Ryan Mazzola pulled me back to life. I want to thank you. You're welcome. Can you, well, this is going to sound stupid, maybe even gay. Well, that's on brand for me, I chuckled, which made Ryan smile. Can you stay until I fall asleep? Ryan's throat seemed to expire on the language. I get it. I nodded. I can do that. I took some sleeping medication while you were in the hallway. It shouldn't be long now. There was another pause before I spoke up. Listen, you can't be a drug dealer your whole life. I should have bit my tongue, but I couldn't. Look where it ended you up. Almost dead. And when you're off drugs, you seem like a pretty cool guy. Thank you? Ryan chuckled, unsure about whether it was a compliment or a backhanded insult. Maybe we could see if we can get you a job at Zalaki. No promises, and I wouldn't just offer this to anyone. But, well, you'll need something new, and yeah. You're not usually this choked up. I'm tired. I need to stop being a wordsmith and just let you rest. Let us both rest. I didn't tell Ryan that chances were high I'd be working a little more after he got some sleep. I would take that job, if there was one, Matty. You've done so much for me. This amount of praise was one spoonful away from being too much. It's fine, really. Now, let's put on some bad television, or maybe we should put on Netflix. Wait, this is a hospital. They probably only have 3 channels. Ryan Mazzola fell asleep a half hour later, and I left the hospital feeling quite happy. Thankfully, the hospital was able to put an extra guard on the floor. I didn't think Redwood would be crazy to attack Ryan in a hospital setting. I'd gotten some information, and I had a new friend, but most importantly, I had survived what was now the scariest part of my investigator bounty hunter career to date. Not too shabby for a wannabe journalist. It was almost 2 a.m, which was late, but given that my tranquilization of sorts had acted like a nap, I wasn't super tired. Besides, Santiago, Alison, and Mariah were at the office waiting for me. I rolled into a Taco Well drive-thru, spent $30, and carried it back to the office. "Did you bring a taco for me?" Alison asked. My face went deadpan. "Are you serious? I was just at the hospital. You didn't have time to grab a snack?" "We did grab a meal," Mariah pointed out. "It was a meal, not a whole day's worth of food," Alison sassed back. Santiago's thin lips were pulled into the tiniest smile I've ever seen on a human. "We've been doing drive-bys on the red house on Murray Hill, where we think Claudia and Haley live." Mariah caught me up to speed. "Are there people in the house?" I asked. "What does it look like?" "Anthony drove by 10 minutes ago and found it dark," Santiago confirmed. I huffed in some air. "So we wait?" "Yes." Alison looked like an annoyed cat who just wanted to sleep. "Can I go home now?" "We have to talk to Elroy, don't we?" I muttered with a sad look on my face. Nobody in the room seemed ready to have that discussion. Mariah's face lit up. "Actually, we don't. I forgot to tell you on the phone. Anthony and David took him into protective custody. The whole police force is looking for Redwood. They found plenty of evidence at Crafty Creatures, and Mrs. Elroy had a lot of, shit on her phone, to say the least." "Oh no," I gasped. "Tell me it's not like nudes." "Let's say Redwood was thorough in his seduction process," Mariah confirmed. Part of me was intrigued to see the evidence. Another part of me thought I'd end up ripping my eyes out. "So we can go home and rest?" I asked with a slight smile. I was still on a small adrenaline high from escaping death multiple times over. "Yes, please," Mariah yawned. "We should try be back here by noon. Does that work?" "Not the best idea." Alison was making her way to the front door with her purse slung over her shoulder like roadkill. "I'll try for 1, maybe." The next morning, Santiago and I arrived at noon sharp at Lucky Bonds and Investigations. I was still crashing at Santiago's place for safety reasons. Roommate Ramona was more than happy to have an excuse to stay at her boyfriend's place during these trying times. Santiago and I were so late that morning that the box of donuts had been dismissed from Kathy's desk already. "Alison isn't here, so who ate all these donuts?" I asked receptionist Kathy. Kathy, who looked like a squirrel caught in headlights, coughed up the story. "Doohickey stopped by and took 3. Helen came back at 11 when you guys weren't here and took the rest hostage." "Did no one tell you that we were kidnapped last night?" I looked like I was ready to climb onto a soapbox to fight for injustice. "We're not fashionably late. We're trying to recover from trauma." "All you kids do is talk about trauma," Helen cried out, leaving her office and strutting over to me. Her curls bounced like rubber balls in a wind tunnel. "We're lucky to be alive," I explained. "That's what I say every morning." Helen rolled her eyes as if I was being dramatic. "Besides, standing around doing nothing and coming in at noon is not going to help anyone make money. I have a new window to pay for." Indeed, strong burly men were slowly applying a new window to replace the one that Redwood had busted up. "I have skips for you. I can wait till Mariah and Alison arrive." "One question. Are we hiring?" I followed up, remembering the promise I had made yesterday. "Hiring?" Helen's eyebrows jumped a few feet in inquisitive surprise. "Well, actually, yes. Who do you have in mind?" I filled Helen in on Ryan Mazzola, and she seemed more skeptical than a bunch of government goons. "I suppose," Helen thought about it, "I'd want to interview him." "Of course. And he'd have to stay off drugs." "Absolutely. Except weed. I don't care about a little pot." "Naturally. And he would need to do some training immediately. I think he'd like that." The front door opened to reveal Mariah and Alison. Mariah was wearing large sunglasses, which blocked out most of her face, while Alison wore a more demure sea blue dry-fit shirt with dark green leggings. You could tell Alison was tired when her clothes didn't look like an advertisement for Las Vegas. "Finally! I'm glad I run a business that we can all sleep through." Helen's bitterness rang throughout the room. "We were kidnapped yesterday," Mariah pouted. "It was a whole ordeal." "Fine, I'll accept this kidnapping story." Helen sounded like the boss who didn't believe you were sick, even with a doctor's note. "But on to some real news." Well, Helen sucked in some air. "We sent Dana down to Bolivia to catch a skip. It wasn't supposed to be anything dangerous and was supposed to be easy. I cut in, confused. I thought Dana was off. Well, we weren't sure if Bolivia was happening, Helen began. So she decided to take some time off, but then Bolivia became a go, so she went, and, Dana's been out of contact for 48 hours. We all instantly gasped. What? I questioned. What's happened? We don't know. Helen's earlier sass was now close to tears. Sean has immediately gone down to Bolivia to investigate. Sean had the most obvious crush on Dana. I wasn't surprised he volunteered to go down to Bolivia. What can we do? Mariah asked. Fill in for Sean and Dana. That's why I have extra cases for you. Helen handed the folders to me, but I was still in shock that I didn't even ascertain that I had been handed anything. Hopefully it's all good, but, that Ryan guy, we could use some hands. And, I don't know, pray, think, hope, whatever you want to do. Let's hope both Sean and Dana are back with us shortly. Helen turned back to her office and closed her door softly for the first time in her professional career.